welcome to Athar's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the Team Associated B7 Bag 2, so let's get started. So for Bag 2, we're going to need our assembly from Bag 1, a servo, and then I'd recommend getting the aluminum servo horn, part number 1370 from Associated. This is the 25 tooth spline. You'll have to look to see if for the other splines, but that's the most commonly used one. So let's go ahead and open these bags, and we're also going to need our chassis. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do in Bag 2 Step 1 is install the bulkhead, one of the shims, and the assembly from Bag 1 onto the chassis. So we have our bulkhead, which is aluminum. This used to be I want to say like close to a $30 option part to have an aluminum one. It's nice to see that they included this in the kit. Chassis is beautifully machined as usual. So very nice to see. Okay. So it looks like there are two shims for the bulkhead, and they both say 1 millimeter on there, so it doesn't matter which one we get. So it only shows using one shim, so we'll have one of those, and we're going to need two M3x14 flathead screws. I'm going to check on page 3 of the manual to make sure I got the correct ones. All right, so I think the easiest way to install this is, you'll notice on the bottom of the ball stud mount, there are two bosses here. These two large bosses are going to install into these two holes here and here. So you have the ball studs towards the front of the vehicle. So it just kind of snapped into place and it's holding it in there, just like so. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this 1 millimeter shim and then our bulkhead on, just like so, lining up the holes. And we're going to install the two M3x14 screws in these two holes here and here. So you want to make sure that the ball stud mount here is sitting flush with the chassis. There's no gap. So that's exactly how we want it installed. So that was Bag 2 Step 1. We can go ahead and continue. So next we're going to install our ESC plate, which is 11 grams. And that's going to install right here. We need 4 M2x3 flathead screws with some thread lock. I don't think the kit comes with any thread locker, but blue or like a medium thread lock would suffice. This is from another kit that I build, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this. So all I did was install the plate, and the 4 screws are going to install it in these 4 holes. Typically, I don't install the weights on the B64. I don't think I did On the B63, I removed it as well, but since this is a new version, new generation of buggy, I'm going to go ahead and install it, see how it drives, and then as I tune the car and try to get it closer to our minimum weight, then I'll figure out whether or not I want to remove it. All right, we can go ahead and install the battery foams into the channels here and here. And all you do for this is you remove the backing on the foam. There's an adhesive on the back, and just line it up and stick it on. All right, next we can get our side rails and our fan mount. So let's go ahead and get those ready. There's a fan mount and a plug. So I'll keep the plug separately just in case, but I will end up running a fan on this car since I'll be running it in our 17.5 class. So let's go ahead and get these off the parts tree and trimmed if necessary. Everything's trimmed. Go ahead and line this up. Looks like it's going to go on like so. The plastics quality is actually really good. Very minimal flashing. It just feels really good in the hand. So we're going to need 10 M3x8 flathead screws. And I believe those were in a separate bag altogether. So let's go ahead and grab those. We'll go ahead and do this one side first. So on the right side rail, we're going to install 5 screws in these 5 holes. So now we can do the left side rail. And the screws are going to install in these 5 holes. And in this hole here, we're going to do something different because we have to install the fan mount. I'm going to do these 4 first, and then I'll do this one last. Okay, so now for the last screw that installs in this hole, we need to install the fan mount. So this mounts in one direction only. There we go. It's going to mount like so in this orientation. So how I'm going to install it is I went ahead and installed it in the hole. Keep my finger on there so it doesn't push out, and then we can install our last screw. So there we go. I'm going to set the chassis aside for now. I'm going to grab my servo. I'm going to need our servo horn. We're also going to need the steering links, which are going to be in this bag. So let's go ahead and get this out. So we're going to need these 2 parts here and here off this little parts tree for the steering links. So we can get those off the parts tree. We're going to need the M3x12 set screw. And we're also going to need a 1mm aluminum ball stud washer. So what we're going to do is I believe this used to be a 10mm set screw. So we're going to install this into one of the steering links, 5.5mm. And how I got that is there's 12. That's going to be a 1mm spacer in between. You want them to be evenly installed in both of these steering links. So 12 minus 1 is 11. 11 divided by 2, since there's 2 links, will be 5.5. So we want to install 5.5 in. So we're going to measure once this is installed, and we should have 6.5 being shown. Okay, got 6.5. So just go ahead and install the ball stud washer and then the other side steering link. And there shouldn't be a gap between the two. The angle should be close to this. So it's not quite, maybe like a little less than 90 degrees from each other. So there we go. Let's go ahead and get our servo ready. I'm just reusing my servo from my B64. I'm gonna go ahead and hook this up, center it with my radio, and then I'll be right back. All right, so I got my servo as close to center as possible, and I know my trim can get it completely vertical. So we can go ahead and install our screws. I'm gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on here, because I've seen these back out. All right, so now we can grab our 8mm long ball stud, another ball stud washer. So we're just going to put the ball stud washer onto the ball stud, like so, and then install it with a little bit of blue Loctite since we're using the aluminum servo horn. An upgrade I would highly recommend, and I say this with confidence because I've used the plastic one and I have broken it. And it was in a main. So the servo is ready to install onto the new servo mount. So let's go ahead and get that ready. So the old mount was aluminum on the sides and it had a plastic piece that joined the two. This is all one piece plastic. Does feel, I mean, the upright sections feel pretty stiff, so we'll see. If not, maybe they'll make an upgrade to aluminum. I'm just curious to see what difference it actually makes in steering. If it's going to give a more direct feel when you have aluminum or the servo being pretty rigid. Okay, so this is trimmed. We need 4 M3x6 low profile socket head cap screws. So these are the screws that we need. You see that they have a very low profile head compared to, say, like a typical button head cap screw or a flat head cap screw. And we're just going to be installing it, you know, in the 4 holes for the servo. So there we go. That's what it looks like now. Now this assembly is ready to install onto the chassis. So we're going to need 2 M3x10 flathead screws. And we're also going to need our chassis. So the screws are going to install in these 2 holes here and here. So it looks like there's probably going to be some servo weight. It's not included in the kit. I'm kind of surprised, but maybe it's not necessarily needed, but we're going to install this just like so. And if you look on the bottom, the screws are going to install in this hole here and this hole. You just got to line up the holes and then install the screws. Be cautious not to over tighten these screws since you are going into plastic and this mounts the servo. Just be, once you feel it like snug up, it's good. I feel like these are gonna eventually strip out if you crash a lot, so we'll see how long this lasts, and then eventually if there's an upgrade, I think I'll probably get that upgrade. Now, I mean, you probably could have installed this earlier, but let's go ahead and install our steering link. Now we can get our top plate and get this off the parts tree and install it. So the top plate's going to install in these three holes here, here, and here. So once you install this or set it on top like so, kind of just fits into place. So we're going to install a screw here. This screw is going to be, well, all these screws are going to be the same size. They're M3 by 16 button head cap screws. So one here, here, and here. I know on the B64, if you over tighten this screw, it could cause the steering to bind up. So what I'm going to do here is tighten it all the way up and then maybe just back it off just a little bit to make sure that nothing's binding. Another way to make sure that it's not binding is to undo the servo, the steering link, I mean, and make sure that the bell cranks move nice and free. And I can tell it moves nice and free without having to take it apart. So fit quality is really good so far. All right, next it's telling us to install the anti-roll bar pivots. These right here, but we installed them in step 1 since I didn't want them to be just lying around and getting lost. We can install the anti-roll bar link, which are these items here on this parts tree. So we can get this off and installed. Let's go ahead and install these onto the pivots. Now we can get the control arms off the parts tree. These are new control arms specific to the B7, so they're longer and the parts quality looks amazing. So pretty excited about these. All right, so these are directional. You'll see R for right, L for left. So know which side they go on. So we're gonna go ahead and install the two very small screws. They're M2 by 4 button head cap screws. We're gonna install them in the small hole here on the large end. The end that attaches to the bulkhead. So we're just gonna lightly screw this in until it shoulders up and it's good. So we're gonna do that on both sides. This kind of holds the hinge pin in place and is a stop. The hinge pins are actually, there's set screws in the bulkhead that kind of hold them in place. So they're in, just like so. So what we're going to do now is we're going to line up the control arms and install our hinge pins from the front. Just like so. And you can see everything moves nice and free under its own weight. So we don't have to ream or anything. So all I did was push these all the way back. So we can turn this over now and take 4 M3x3 set screws and install them in these 4 holes. And apply some blue Loctite so they don't come undone. And just snug them up onto the hinge pins so that the hinge pins don't move. All right, those are installed. Still want to make sure. All right, so this control arm doesn't move under its own weight. So something is binding up. So all I did was I loosened these 4 set screws. I pushed the control arms forward and then retightened them. So there must be something up on the front that's rubbing or causing it to bind up. So, but that fixed my issue. It's just very minuscule movement, but everything moves nice and free, like it should. All right, so now we can install the front bumper with 2 M3x14 flathead screws. So there's the bumper. So we're gonna put the bumper on there, and the 2 M3x14 screws are gonna install in these 2 holes. All right, it's on. Set the chassis aside for a second. We're gonna grab our front shock tower. Now pay close attention when you assemble the shock tower because it is directional. On the front of the shock tower, you have these countersunk holes. On the back side, you don't. The back side is gonna have the part number. So when we assemble this with the shock bushings, we want to ensure that we take the 2 M3x20 low profile socket head cap screws and install them from this side. And it looks like the kit setup is in the middle hole. So we're going to install it like so. So now what I like to do is install the Loctite, not on the end, but kind of like in the middle. And then install the shock bushings. So you use your 2mm hex driver, hold one end, and on the other side you take a 7mm driver and you can tighten it up. So now we can install the new front shock tower guard. So it says the images are really bad in the manual, but it says to line it up like so. Push down on the top of the shock tower guard and then slowly rotate down, but this lip that's right here doesn't want to go over the shock tower. Okay, looks like you just gotta force it on. All I did was see if I can take it off and do it again. All right, so see if I can do this close up. What I did was I just pushed really hard to kind of bend like so, and then just rotate down to get it to snap into place. It's like you put the top down and then you rotate like so, and it snaps into place like it's supposed to. Wish they would have kept the old design just because it's a little easier to deal with, but this will work. So now we can install this onto the chassis with 2 M3x10 flathead screws. And if you want to use a front wing mount, then I'm going to put it on now. I typically don't run the front wing, but I'll go ahead and try it and see. So we're going to install these 4 holes line up with these 4 holes like so. So the 2 M3x10 screws are going to install here. If you're not running the front wing, then you install another 2 M3x10 screws here. But if you use the front wing, then you need the M3x12 millimeter screws here. So we have our front wing mount. We're just going to go ahead and install it there. We have 2 M3x12 flathead screws. Have some stuff left over. We have a shim for the front bulkhead, which might be used for tuning. We got 2 M3x10 flathead screws. Those are going to be used if you don't use the front wing mount. I believe that's going to be the Servo screw. We didn't use that because I already had one. And then there's 2 screws left over. They're short. Those are for the front wing. So I'm just going to go ahead and install those onto the mount so I don't lose them. And one last thing that we didn't do was install the anti-roll bar links onto the control arms so we can snap those on. You kind of have to work them in. It's kind of a tight fit. Just kind of rotate it a little bit and it gets in there. I just use some tweezers to pop them on. And everything moves nice and free like it should. So there we go. So that's it for bag 2. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know down in the comments if you had any issues. I'll do my best to help you out and help the community to know if there's any issues that are out there. So thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be bag 3.